Good afternoon, everybody. I want to thank everyone for investing their time with us today. My name's Michael Douglas, and I'm the Director of Accounts with ENFOS, and I'll be moderating the presentation today. So just a couple logistical items before we get going. So all callers are muted. So we encourage everyone to please ask questions either in the chat or the questions tab in the panel here on GoToWebinar. Time permitting, our plan is to answer as many of those questions as we possibly can live at the end of the presentation, and any that we don't get to, we'll follow up with an email. Also, today's webinar is being recorded, and that recording along with the PowerPoint will be sent to everybody within the next couple of days. So many of you today are already customers or users of ENFOS, but some of you are not. So I will provide a very brief introduction, and if you're interested in continuing the conversation, my contact information will be on the last slide. So ENFOS is a software company that helps organizations manage all of their project, financial, and environmental data around the remediation program in one place. Having that capability allows our customers to manage their entire portfolio the exact same way at any scale while removing many of their existing administrative burdens. And that brings me to the topic of today's discussion, how to conduct a virtual remediation project review meeting using ENFOS. And so with that, I'd like to introduce our speaker, Roger Well. Roger is a co-founder of ENFOS and currently serves as our Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer. He has over 30 years of experience in the field, having started his career as an environmental consultant. He has a bachelor's and a master's in geology in addition to an MBA. He's written several papers and presented on multiple topics related to operational excellence, data insights, and building business cases for companies wanting to deploy an enterprise remediation management system. We have a few of those listed here, and I can provide you with copies if you're interested. Finally, Roger currently lives in the woods outside of the Chicago area with his wife, Dana, where he's been practicing social distancing for years. So with that, I'll hand it over to Roger Well.
Thanks, Mike. And Mike, I just want to do a sound check. Can you hear me okay?
You sound perfect.
Okay, great. Well, when Mike told me he was going to say I lived in the woods, I wanted him to also tell you guys that I'm also a 1K United Airlines traveler. So that's a nice combination. This year, not so much, it looks like. So today for our agenda, we're going to go over 3 broad areas. Exploring the project review meeting. We have a few slides that we want to talk about that to set the context. For the second part of the agenda, which is an ENFOS use case around project reviews. And then we'll end up with Q&A. And as Mike said, if we don't get to your questions during the Q&A session, we'll make sure that we distribute those afterwards. I would also like to thank everyone for attending and spending your hour today with us doing this. We had great response in terms of interest level. So our registrations for this webinar were very, very high. And I can see that the people that are actually signing on, the attendees, that number is very high as well. So we're going to exceed 100 people on this call. So there's a lot of interest in this particular use case around ENFOS. So take a second to read this quote. I've highlighted 2 areas here, crisis management and then also before the fact. And what I really wanted to do with this quote was to point out the fact that this isn't all or nothing or one or the other. certainly your capabilities as an environmental consultant and also as a client in the remediation space, you do have to deal with crisis management. We know that. That's the nature of the beast with the types of projects and risks and liabilities that you're dealing with. But you don't want to operate in a crisis management mode on a ratio that exceeds your proactive types of processes and programs. And that's really the before the fact, dealing with project issues and risks as they develop, and they will develop because of the complexity and the uncertainty around the work that we do. So how do we do that? Well, there's one way to deal with these issues, problems, risks, as well as celebrating successes along the way, is to have project review meetings, or some people call them project update meetings. And there's two major elements when it comes to those that I'd like to point out before we get into a little bit more of the detail. One of them is it does require team engagement. We have many different types of professionals and technicians that are working on these projects, from the back office folks to the project management teams to the engineers and the scientists and the laboratories. So it is absolutely a necessity to have strong team engagement. And project reviews and project updates is one of the major delivery mechanisms of that. The second item around the project review and how do we do this, dealing with this proactively, is the necessity to incorporate high quality content that's aligned with your purpose, which is your project or your program charter, your mission statement if it's a remediation function, but to incorporate high quality content into that team engagement in the most efficient way possible. And that's what we're going to talk about for the rest of this webinar. In remediation, we have different types of project meetings. This is a general schematic kind of showing you those. We'll generally have a project kickoff meeting. During these long life cycle projects, you're going to have many project status meetings. So those are repetitive. Those are the project reviews. There are stakeholder meetings. These could be with other property owners, other PRPs. They could be with the community at large. There are also internal meetings. So if you're a project manager for the client company, we know that you have to deal with stakeholders internally into your organization, whether that's legal, real estate, operations, and plant type folks. You have change control meetings as well throughout the life of a remediation project. Sometimes you'll incorporate change control meetings into your project status meetings. Sometimes you won't. Change control meetings are very important and could be a topic of its own webinar, but these are typically one second, I'm sorry. Okay, I got to do another sound check. Mike, can you hear me?
I hear you now, Roger.
Okay, just had a technical difficulty. I had to switch over to my display audio, so I apologize for that. The change control meetings have a lot to do with the stages or the transition of your project phases through time. Many of our customers work with stages and decision gates. We also have changes to the project because of uncertainties or more information is available, or as we're just transitioning from phase 1 to phase 2 or phase 2 to phase 3. So change control meetings are very critical as well and should be part of your project engagement plan. And then finally, the project closeout meeting. This is also an important stage or an important meeting event. It's something that probably doesn't get its fair share of attention, but these are certainly where we're celebrating a closure, a no further action, maybe one operating unit on a mega site or one area of concern is being shut down because you've done your job. So we have project closeout meetings as well.
For today, we're going to talk about the project status meetings, also called the project review. So the project status meetings are really made up of these basic elements. We have our standard project management categories of project schedule, project scope, project budget or cost, and our project deliverables. We also have issues and risks to deal with. And then we have team member updates that incorporate various aspects of these other elements. So this is what we're generally talking about during a project status meeting. What makes the some meetings more effective than others, or what are the overall success factors for project review meetings? Well, here are some of the bullets. Certainly establishing meeting objectives up front, maintaining a recurring nature of your meetings. This is the ongoing repetitive nature. The frequency is typically going to be based on the complexity of the project. It could also be on timing around peak work periods and your decision gates. So in other words, you may not have to have frequent meetings on a project that's in the O&M stage, maybe once a year. But if you're in site characterization, remedial design, and remedial selection, you're going to have more frequent meetings, of course. Involving the right people at the right time. Organization and uniformity. So then that bullet, along with the others, are going to be part of our demonstration today. But organization and uniformity is really key to a successful program. And you've got multiple projects going on with an overall program. So having this organizing principle, we call it a schema for your sites and projects, is a critical success factor. How do we define the subsets of our sites? We call them areas of concern. These might be operating units for you based on your terminology, could be individual projects. But we all have sites and facilities of various magnitude and size. And one of the key aspects of dealing with complex work is to break that down into smaller chunks. And within ENFOS, we have a convention around an organizational hierarchy to let you do that. Accessibility and transparency. So having data and information at your fingertips is crucial during the project review meeting, but also at any time during the life cycle of the project. Notes and documentation, and lots of it. But again, organized and structured in a way that we have access to it. It's easy to search on. And all pertinent team members have access to it. And then finally, having clear accountabilities and assignments. That's the follow-up work to the project review meeting. Those in-between times when we're out there executing on what it is that we said we're going to do and by when. So the virtues of virtual meetings. Many of you have global projects and are doing virtual meetings already. But I also know that in the United States, the meetings typically have not been virtual. We're going to show some survey data points here in a few minutes to talk about that. But virtual meetings, they allow you to leverage your information technology like ENFOS, but also your applications that help you do live meetings and share screens and cameras and so on. Share documents, collaborate. Keeping teams informed. Projects keep moving forward. Business continuity. Let's face it, in this time when we all are pretty much confined to our homes, unless it's an essential business in the state that you live and work in, the business has to keep running one way or the other. You might be collaborating with regulators. You might be working on prioritization. You might be working on where can I defer work without risking compliance or risking recontamination. So we have to think about business continuity, and virtual meetings help us do that. Certainly enhancing the telecommuting experience that we're all faced with, and then less travel. The ENFOS customers that are on this call have heard us talk about these elements in the past, but we have several philosophy aspects to the ENFOS solution. A couple of them here relate directly to our topic today. So having everything in one place, organized how you want it, and always accessible by the team is an ENFOS product and solution philosophy. And the ENFOS application gets populated during the course of people doing their work. So that element I want to describe just a little bit more. There are data governance strategies out there today that still rely on a few gatekeepers to populate databases and spreadsheets and systems. This is certainly the old way of doing business. The modern way of doing business is that we're all leveraging the information technology and the software that we have access to. And in the course of us doing our day-to-day jobs, we're populating the application with data, with files, with documentation of decisions, and so on. So that is a key philosophy of the ENFOS solution that applies directly to what we're talking about here. What we don't want to see is that if we have to do a project review meeting once a quarter or once a month or even once a year, that there is a unique work effort that's required to pull all of that information and data together, summarize it, assess it, and then be able to present it to your client, right? We want to move away from that. And we're going to show that today during our demonstration on just exactly how that works. The information should already be readily available, should be formatted and organized in a schema that allows you to quickly run through the key aspects of your projects and the updates around those areas that we talked about: schedule, scope, budget, deliverables, issues, and risks. So we did an informal, non-scientific survey, but I thought that the information that we got back would be of interest to people on the call. So we asked 20 companies 4 questions around project reviews. Number 1 was, do you use ENFOS during your project review meetings? So I did ask a few companies that are not currently ENFOS users, so I took them out of the data analysis for that question. Do you pay consultants to prepare and participate in project review meetings? Number 3, have you historically done these in person or remotely, or some combination thereof? And then finally, what could be done better? So I want to share those responses with you. And here are the results of the first 3 questions. So 80% of the companies that we surveyed that use ENFOS said, yes, we use ENFOS during project review meetings to some level. And I got some comments back about the modules or the sections or of ENFOS or the reports that are used. So even for those companies that are using ENFOS already for project review meetings, we hope to share some new tips and some new ideas to help you even improve that even more than you are today. Number 2, do you pay consultants to prepare and participate? So 85% said yes. The companies that said no there were telling me that, well, we actually do pay, but it's built into project management already. The others that responded to this were basically saying, yes, we either have a unit price established for project review meetings, or we have a separate budget within the project to do those. So it does cost money to do project review meetings, as it should. But what we're trying to do is make that the use of those that spending and people's time much more efficient, so you can focus more on the key issues and risks as opposed to doing your data gathering, your data analysis, preparing paper documents or PDF documents that are unique or special to a project review meeting. Number 3, how have you historically done these? So all of the respondents said, we do them in person. We prefer to do them in person. But about a quarter of those said, we will do some remote project review meetings, but it's really only to supplement those in-person meetings. Okay. So I don't really want to make a value judgment on this. I understand the benefit of meeting in person. I'm that kind of a guy as well. That's the relationship side of this business. But we do have an opportunity to improve on those in-person meetings by using high quality data through ENFOS. But we can also probably supplement these remote virtual type project review meetings even more than we are doing today. And we may see that once we come out of the COVID-19 situation we're in now. What could be done better? This was the last question, and I paraphrased some of the responses. I think many of these you would expect to see, like better documentation, clear and concise understanding of decisions. Preparation by our consultants is critical. So this gets back to how are you compensated as a consultant for this, and what types of activities go into that scope to prepare for a project review meeting. This next one I thought was interesting. This came from a client project manager who said, our PMs need to be as knowledgeable as the consultant PMs, so they both drive strategy. Makes sense, right? You're working off of the same knowledge base, and they expect their project managers to have a handle on the technical and the business aspects of the projects that they manage. PMs need to know where to go find information quickly. And then finally, I think another interesting one, as a client PM, I need access to all decisions and supporting data that came out of the project review meeting, so that when I have my internal stakeholder meetings, I am prepared and I have immediate access to that information, right? So that's another value point of the ENFOS system, is that it's used for the interface between the consultant PM and the client PM, but it's also used as the interface between the client PM and all their internal stakeholders. Okay, I'm going to switch gears now and move into the ENFOS system. So give me just a couple seconds to make that transition. Okay, let me get logged in. All right, Mike, I'm just going to check with you. Do you see the ENFOS application now?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And I also want to do a time check here. We're about 24 minutes after the hour. Okay. So I'm logged into a demo system, and the system has dummy data in it. I'm also logged in as a client project manager. Those of you that use ENFOS know that consultants have user accounts, but they have different sets of permissions around security and access to different projects that they're assigned to, as well as their own company's transactions. But I'm just letting everyone know I'm signed in as the client project manager right now. And I'm going to be going through a list of features that our customers are using for their project review meetings, as well as some areas that aren't currently being used that I think will be helpful for future meetings. So the first thing that I want to show you would be related to some safety data. And I know that many of your project review meetings, if not all of them, start with a safety minute or some kind of a safety topic. And one of the things that you could be doing in ENFOS for that would be to look at the safety data for your various suppliers or vendors. So if I come into the admin module and click on the vendors link, I can see the list of all of the consultants, contractors, and labs that we use as the client company. And if I'm doing a project review meeting with ENFOS, we can open up that vendor information, and we can come down to this section called safety metrics. And safety metrics is a workflow that allows the consultants and contractors to upload their hours and their subcontractor hours by month for the current year, and then you'll retain all the history from your previous years by month. And ENFOS calculates the OSHA recordable incident rate. So one of the things that you might want to do as a consultant or as a client PM is celebrate the fact that ENFOS has no incidents January, February, or March, and our incident rate for 2020 is at 0.00. This information can roll up, so you can look at a summary of this for all of the vendors that you're working with. But you might want to quickly talk about that. Once you're in the vendor section, again, we're looking at a vendor called ENFOS. I might also want to just update myself on our contractual documents. So our documents with the ENFOS vendor master data includes our master service agreement, our current certificate of insurance, and I want to make sure that's valid, and our corporate health and safety policy. So you might want to do a high-level check of some safety data as well as some of the commercial aspects before you get going on the actual project review meeting. Okay. The next feature that I want to talk about when it comes to project review meetings is the ENFOS Portfolio Builder. Inside of our reporting module, we have a submodule called Portfolios. So if I click that, I'll navigate there. And as an ENFOS user, whether I'm the consultant project manager or the client project manager, I'm going to see the list of my portfolios. Portfolios are just groups of sites and projects based on different attributes. You can see I have an East portfolio, I have my sites, and I have sites assigned to ENFOS. These are just 3 examples. I'm not going to go through the training on how to create a portfolio in today's session. I just want you to see the utility of it. So you can see that if I want to review all of the sites that I am the project manager on as an environmental consultant, I would have created the portfolio. I can come in and my action items and click map. And we can start our session with, okay, client, here are the sites that I'm managing for you, and these are the ones that we're going to be reviewing today. So I have a site in Chicago, South Kilbourne Avenue plant, and then another site named Chicago. You saw I had a site out west, and then I have one in Pittsburgh and one in Ohio. Okay. I can click those links and navigate around, but that's my portfolio of sites. One of the advantages of having a portfolio is that anytime I want to run a report, I can come into the ENFOS reporting module and run a report off of a portfolio. So if I click select a portfolio and I say my sites, now any report I run in ENFOS, whether it's an activity report or an issues list or a financial summary, it will pull data just from those sites or projects in that portfolio. So I recommend that all users, whether you're consultants or clients, you take advantage of portfolios by creating subsets of your sites. You can use this for reporting and navigation and querying capability. Okay. The next item I want to show is our project manager's desktop. And I'm going to show you a really nice way to navigate there. So we have this left panel that can be open or closed, and I can bookmark my favorite sites or projects. So you can see I have my Chicago site, a site called Demo, and a site called Russellville, and then I have some AOCs bookmarked as well. If I click on Demo site, I will navigate in that organizational hierarchy that we talked about. How do we organize sites and projects? I've now navigated to the demo site. So I can quickly see that. Underneath that site, I have multiple areas of concern. Again, part of the organizing structure. If I come into my AOC, I can see all the different areas of concern that I've used to make this large site more manageable for me, right? So I have a South Zone groundwater remediation unit. I hit go, and now I've navigated to that particular area of concern. The project manager's desktop is a summary view of pertinent information from all these other various modules put in one place. So I'm going to click on my PM desktop, and now I've navigated to the project manager's desktop for this specific area of concern, and I have sections of data. So if I'm doing a project review meeting and I want to give my customer a quick overview of where we're at financially and technically, the PM desktop is a place to start. And I just want to do a quick check with Mike. Mike, is my screen share and my audio still coming in fine?
Everything's great, Roger.
Okay, thank you. So I have my area of concern summary. I have access to all of my documents by folder. I can look at the contact list, so I can see who the consultant is and who the client project manager or remediation leader is on this site. I also have access to all of my notes. We're going to talk more about notes, so I won't go into the detail on these, but you can see I've got my project history notes, my project review meeting notes, my regulatory notes, and my site strategic plan notes on this screen. I have my financial information, such as if this is an environmental remediation liability and I'm managing a reserve, I can see my reserve balance in real time to the penny. I can see the life to date spend and my accrual adjustments. I have that information broken down by work breakdown structure here. I'm going to review this in a little bit more detail later. I have my annual budget. So our annual budget for this area of concern is 172. Here's our spend to date for the year, and there's our remaining budget. Now notice that these sections all have links into the various module on where that data is actually managed and where the workflow exists to manage those activities. I'll jump into one of those here in a minute. I can look at total spend by phase. This is my historical spend. I can look at that in tabular or chart view. I can hover over to get more detail exposed. My open purchase order. So if you want to have a talk about your open work as a client project manager, you'll see multiple vendors listed here. But if you are logged in and running the meeting as the consultant project manager, you're only going to see transactions from your company. So if I was the ENFOS person, I would only see those 2 open POs. But here I have a snapshot of all my open purchase orders. I can see the approved purchase order amount, the approved invoice amount, what percent invoice, and then if I'm doing earned value, which I am on this top purchase order, I can see that I have a CPI, a cost performance index of 0.78. If I want to drill down, I can click an individual PO to get to the original scope of work and the original cost estimate. Or if I want to navigate to this AOC's purchase order page, I would click that link. It opens up a new tab in ENFOS. And now I'm in the purchase order submodule instead of the PM desktop. And now I can drill into specific purchase orders. So if I wanted to look at that earned value in more detail for this purchase order, I would follow that sequence that I just took. And now I can see by task for the work that's in this purchase order, I can see what we estimated, what we've invoiced, our percent complete, our percent invoiced, my earned value, which is the calculation of my percent complete times the estimate, that's earned value, my cost variance, and then my CPI. So you can see on our project oversight, we're 20% complete and we're 20% invoiced. Therefore, my CPI will be 1.0. That's what you're looking for if you're on track. Anything above 1 is a good sign. Anything below 1 is a sign that you're lagging behind your spend plan. So I can see for Q1 sampling, we're 50% complete with the work, but we've invoiced 68.5%. Our cost variance is 2,500 in that case. If I'm done drilling down and I've had that discussion, now we can go ahead and close that tab and we're right back to the project manager's desktop. Okay, so every time you click on one of these go-to links, it opens up a new tab. When you're done exploring or drilling down, just close the tab and you come back out to the PM desktop. Okay. I have other areas as well here. Now we have the PM desktop at 2 levels in your project schema. We have it at the area of concern and at the site level. So if I roll up to the site level, I have my site summary information, site documents. I have roll up financial information. I can also see information such as my sample points. So you might be talking about installing new monitoring wells. Well, how many do we have? We can look that way. We can look and say, what type of alert notifications do we have in place? So we've got a down gradient perimeter monitoring alert going on here. I could click on this link to look at what well and what analyte and what threshold value I'm monitoring. I can also talk about a particular set of data right off the project manager's desktop. So this is a query using a date range. We're going to use all dates. We're going to link to the sample points for this site. So my sample point of interest is 2, 3, and 4. I can select a lab method and then analytes, or I can select my analytes directly. This is a dynamic list, so the system knows what you have already for this site. And then I hit go, and on the fly, during my project review meeting, I can look at a time series trend report for a particular analyte and a particular set of monitoring wells. So this is going back to 2014. There's hover over capability, so I can explore those in a little bit more detail. If I need to download this to jump into a report, I can download it, save it, or even annotate it. Okay. So that's an example of going through the PM desktop at the site level, where I've got my financial data and my environmental data, and I also have my compliance data. So I can see I've got a remediation system If I want to look at equipment or uptime or any information around that, I would drill down into that system. I would be looking at my audits. So I can see I had a remediation system integrity audit, a project initiation checklist, and we haven't closed out the project yet, so that's still open. So those are my audits. What kind of permits do I have? I've got a consent order, I've got a NIPD's permit, and then I've got a site work permit. Again, when I'm doing a project review, if I need to drill down into any of these areas, I'm just going to click these links to go look at that information. Okay, and then I have my notes. So here are all my notes, my project history, my review meeting, regulatory, and site strategic plan. Okay, so that's the PM desktop. Very useful for project review meetings, as you can see, because I don't have to go into all the various modules to get a summary of the data. Okay, PM desktop. We talked about the financial information, and we've given many webinars around managing the environmental remediation liability, the asset retirement obligation, or the operational expense account. So I'm not going to spend too much time on that today, but I do want to let you know, if you're looking for the financial picture at a glance for your individual site, the first thing you're going to do is navigate down to your area of concern of interest. You'll confirm that that's what you see in the hierarchy bar. You're going to come into finance, planning, and click on balance. Here's where all of the financial information from your forecasting and budgeting to your work proposals and purchase orders and to your invoices and spend management all that content is aggregated in one place in this balance screen. So you might want to be talking about, what do we have today as a balance? Well, we're at 4.4 million. Let's break that 4.4 million down into its work breakdown structure. In this case, a 2-level WBS. So I can see my current plan. That's my latest forecast here. My spend. This is what the approved invoices, again, by WBS element. My balance by WBS element, my open work commitments, my available to commit out of my balance, and then my PO balance. So this would be a screen that you would go to probably in every single project review meeting to be able to say, where are we currently at? You might also want to say, what is our current estimate to complete? In that case, you're going to come over and go to life cycle. And you're going to see, this is my current estimate to complete from 2020 forward by WBS for this particular AOC. Okay, so I can see my cash flow forecast by year, rolled up by phase and activity, and then for the total as a whole. Okay. All right, so let's move into a different area. Let's talk about notes, because one of the key success factors is lots of documentation. So our notes are in the site module, and you would come into the summary submodule. And here you see a section called notes. And I'm going to close my panel. So these categories of notes are configurable by each customer. So these are examples. We have a project history section. So the project history is where you might be talking about, how did we get to where we are today? So I can see I have notes going back to 2017. So here's a note, right? VOCs were detected in groundwater in 1990, 92. I won't read all of that for you, but this is all documented, date and time stamped, and then also role based. So my newest notes are on top. So I can see for my current remedial action at the site includes some on-site oxygen sparging. Okay. To add notes during a project review meeting would be our next step to show you. So I'm going to close the project history. I'm going to go to my project meeting notes. So I can see that we just had some data entry for a project review meeting. And let's open these up. So you can see this was, this says who was there at the meeting, who was in attendance. This is now taking information that was summarized during that project review meeting and put in a text format. So I've got 3 different entries here for the same project review meeting. If I want to add another entry, I would just click on add a note. I would select my category called project review meeting notes, and then I would just start adding my text here. Now there's 4,000 characters available for each record. If you have more than that, then you just create multiple records. But 4,000 characters is about, it's a little less than a page and a half of notes, single spaced. So 4,000 characters is a lot, but if you need more than that, then you just make a second entry and you give it the same date. So I wanted to show you all that. Very important, right? This information stays with this project regardless of who the consultant is or who the client PM is. I also have regulatory notes and my site strategic plan notes here, all in one place. Okay. The other thing that gets talked about a lot during project review meetings would be my planned activities. So I'm going to come into my activities, and it defaults me to my calendar for April. But I can also go back in time to say, how did we do in the first quarter? I can see a lot of completed activities. O&M was done in January. We had a regulatory review meeting. February, we had an update report, another O&M visit. I can see what we did in March. We had a health and safety audit. And here we are in April. And guess what? I've got an alert here. I've got an activity that's in red. So review lab data. Let's take a look at that. It's overdue. The activity type were laboratory results were due. So one of 2 things happen. Either the lab results aren't in yet, or someone's forgot to come in and update it. So what I would do then, I would come into my data module. I would go to my imports, and I'm going to take a look at my last EDD import for this particular site. And sure enough, those results were delivered on time. So the lab is not in trouble. But what I need to do is I need to come in and change that activity and say that it was actually completed. So I'm going to come back into my activity section, open it up, edit, change my status to complete. I could add more notes. Pace is not in trouble. Hit save. And now that will be completed. ENFOS is tracking those changes and any type of overdue activities. Okay, just a couple more things, and then we're going to wrap up for questions. We have additional information fields that I've already talked to you about, and those can be set up at the site level or the AOC level. It's under additional information. And a lot of times during project review meetings, we need to keep an issue tracking list going. So here's the use case. So for our site, we've got 2 issues. Facility managers complained about traffic cones, and property owner X has requested a change to the off-site access agreement. Who is this assigned to? What priority is it? What's the due date, and what's its status? So this was a custom record created just to track issues that get reviewed and discussed during our project review meetings. So utilizing additional information for project reviews is the best management practice. Okay. Reporting. One of the elements of ENFOS that we want people to utilize more would be My Reports. If I click on My Reports, this is a list of the reports that come out of ENFOS that are important to me as a project manager. I don't have to go through and run these reports individually every time or create criteria. I've saved them into my favorite group, and I can come in with just a couple of clicks and share this with my project team or my client project manager. So my reports in this case we're producing for my portfolio. I've got a site in Chicago and a bunch of projects on this demo site. And we're reviewing my current year budget, my year-to-date spend, remaining budget, my open commitments, my balance, and then my budget for all future years. So I wanted to show you that feature in ENFOS because as you're doing project review meetings, or you just have your normal day-to-day project management reports, you want to create them and favorite them so they're in this list. Okay, so I've got my issue tracking list that we talked about. I could run that report just on the fly with 2 clicks. So that's the same data that we were just looking at in the site module as a favorited report. I've got other types of reports that are useful. Project review meeting notes. Maybe we need to send a deliverable to another stakeholder with the project review meeting notes. So again, click run. And here are those results for each one of those records that we were just looking at in the site module. Okay. All right, one last thing. Over in our compliance module, we have audits. And audits are set up and configured by each customer. And a best practice is to have a project initiation checklist and a project closeout checklist. You can make these questions or these checklists whatever you would like, but I wanted to show you, here's an example of a project initiation. So we have administrator tasks and we have project manager tasks. Has the new project been created in SAP and ENFOS? Has the consultant vendor been assigned to the project? For project manager, has legal been notified of a new liability? Has the business plan been approved? Are your regulatory requirements documented in ENFOS? Did you have your project kickoff meeting? So that's an example of using our audit functionality for a project initiation checklist. The same is true for a project closeout checklist. Now, we're not there yet on this project, but here's an example for project closeout. Have you received the regulatory agency letter? Yes, no, non-applicable, and comment. Is there an approved well and/or equipment decommissioning plan? Has legal been notified of the closure? Have all vendor invoices and POs been approved and processed? Have you zeroed out your reserve balance? Again, just an example of a project closeout checklist, but another feature that is very useful for the project review meeting. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop. I hope that we gave you some good ideas today, showed you some features that you may not be using, and help get your teams more engaged. And we're now going to move into some questions and answers. So Mike, I'm going to let you take it away.
Sounds good, Roger. So, and we have had a lot of questions go in. So if we don't get to all of them, we'll send out an email follow-up. So first question, would you suggest that a consultant PM drive the ENFOS project review meeting or the client PM?
That's a good question. I think that the consultant PM should drive for the main reason that if it's the client PM driving, then they're going to be potentially exposing some other consultants' content, such as work proposals and invoices. So if it's the consultant PM driving with their user account, they'll be restricted just to their sites and then just to their company's financial information.
Perfect. So another question. I have a large site with a lot of unique fields and information tracking compared to the rest of the portfolio. So how could ENFOS help me track the information that's specific to the large site?
Yeah, many ways. The first principle would be to think of that as a mega project or a mega site. And one of your first principles of large complex work is to break it down, to chunk it down. And the first convention that's used for that is to set up unique areas of concern or unique projects that become their own entities that roll up to that overall mega site, that mega site. And if you chunk it down to areas of concern, now you can take advantage of all that functionality that I just showed you, whether it's additional information fields, notes, and so on, but everything's organized and associated to that project that is just a piece or a component of the overall mega site. You can also assign different vendors and consultants to those individual projects as well.
Okay. Another question here. So when creating the portfolios, are those user specific or client specific? So as an example, if I'm a client PM and I want to make portfolios, can the other client PM see them as well?
That is an option. It's a permission-based issue. So when an individual user signs on to ENFOS and creates a portfolio, first of all, that user only has access to the superset of sites that they're assigned to. So they're limited to just sites where their company is assigned. Then from there, you can create subgroups of those sites called portfolios. But once you do that, you can either make that a private portfolio or a public portfolio. If it's private, then only you see it. If it's public, then other users from your consulting company can see it, and then the client users can see it as well. But it still has strict security protocols around it, but it's your choice to make it private or public, knowing that public still has restrictions based on the company that you work for.
Sounds good. Question related to finance. So can the annual budget be presented in a chart format by month? So as an example, budget versus actuals.
It can. So there is a global setting that each customer selects, which is their planning granularity. And their current year can be broken down by month for your budget and your actuals, or by quarter for your budget and actuals, or an annual budget with your annual actuals there. So that's a global configuration. If you're doing your planning and you're planning by month for your current year, then yes, you can run a single report that matches up the cash flow forecast for that month as well as your actual spend for that month. ENFOS also has a true up feature. It's a planning roll forward that will take your overspend or your underspend for the previous month, the month you just completed, and it will push that over or underspend into the next month for you automatically, but then give you the opportunity to come in and manually redistribute those funds throughout the year.
Okay, perfect. Roger, so last question, and this is a pretty hot topic, so I want to give you the opportunity to answer. Can ENFOS send data to my Microsoft Power BI? I do my reporting there, and I'd like to get information from ENFOS to populate my dashboards.
Yes, you can. So if you're on the client team and that is of interest, then you would reach out to Tori Behrens and start a conversation about that. But ENFOS has incorporated a BI reporting database that's part of the functionality of ENFOS. and a transfer mechanism using OData, which is a standard API mechanism, so that your company's Power BI or any other third-party BI tool can take in ENFOS data as well as any other data source so that you can do analytics, dashboards, and custom reporting. But the best bet there is to talk to Tori Behrens, who's the ENFOS Director of Customer Success. And we recently had a communication going out to all customers about that.
Great. Okay. Last question, Roger, and I can answer this one. So having the technical data in ENFOS looks like it would add a lot of value to the project review meetings. If we're not using that now, how can we get started? So you can either contact myself or Tori Behrens to start that conversation. We've got several modes of operation as related to managing technical environmental data, and we'd love to talk to you about that further. My contact information is here on the final slide. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. It was a great conversation, hopefully added value to your day. As I mentioned at the beginning, the recording of this will be sent out to everyone who registered within the next couple of days. So with that, it ends our session today, and thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.